What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today on the channel we have a Rolex GMT-Master II Pepsi, the 126710BLRO. This is the Rolex that made a giant splash at Bezel World 2018 this year, a GMT Master II with Pepsi bezel in stainless steel. Now a big thank you to my friends over at Bigham Jewelers. They are a local Rolex authorized dealer here in the Naples, Florida area, and they were kind enough to let me come over to their showroom and to film this watch and do a little bit of a presentation. Not going to be my full feature-length style reviews that I might do on a watch that I've owned for weeks or maybe months. I just didn't have that kind of time to spend with it. Nevertheless, I'm still happy to be able to bring it to the channel for review today and share it with you guys. So again, a big thanks to Dan and everybody else over at Bigham Jewelers. If you'd like to learn more about them, I encourage you to go over to bighamjewelers.com. There's definitely some polarizing points about this watch, most notably for people, the Jubilee Bracelet and that red and blue Pepsi bezel. I'm going to talk about those as well as product availability a little more extensively in my closing thoughts. For now, I'm going to jump into the tabletop and I'm going to show you this watch up close, tell you about all the features and give you some impressions. Then again, in my closing thoughts, I'm going to talk about a few of those hot topics, so stick around for the whole video. I think you're going to want to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, here's the watch. Alright guys, here we have it, the Rolex GMT Master II, reference 126710BLRO. First thing we'll talk about on this watch, MSRP $9,250, a little bit more expensive than other versions of the stainless steel GMT Master II. However, this does come with some upgrades, notably the new caliber 3285 Rolex GMT Movement. Basic specs on this watch, we have a 40mm case diameter with 20mm lugs. We have a thickness of approximately 12mm with a lug-to-lug width from one extremity of the case to the other of about 48mm. Overall, fairly standard sizes and proportions for a stainless steel Rolex oyster-cased sports watch. It's right around what we would expect. Now, people do say that the overall lug profile on this quote-unquote super oyster case has been thinned out on this model. I honestly don't notice it. In comparing it to, say, a BLNR Batman, they look the same to me, but if these lugs are thinned out ever so slightly, yeah, that may be the case. That is what I've read people say online to be the case. Other specifications about this watch. We also obviously have a 24-hour graduated bidirectional two-color Cerachrome ceramic bezel. That is, of course, the hallmark, that red and blue GMT Pepsi bezel. We have a screw-down crown, trip-lock crown, which gives us 100 meters of water resistance. Of course, we have a sapphire crystal with the Cyclops magnifier over the date complication over here at the 3 o'clock position. This is an oyster case in 904L oyster steel. The 5-piece link Jubilee bracelet is also in 904L oyster steel, as they're calling it now. The Jubilee bracelet does terminate down into a folding oyster lock safety clasp, which features a 5mm Easy Link extension. Like the majority of Rolex's sports watches here, we have a glossy black dial with 18-karat white gold markers and handset. The markers and handsets feature a chromolite blue luminescence. It's very well done. The movement in this watch, as previously mentioned, new for 2018, is the Rolex caliber 3285, a superlative chronometer. It has a timekeeping range of plus or minus 2 seconds per day. It's a 31 joule bidirectional automatic winding movement that does, of course, feature hand winding and hacking. The vibrations or beats per hour run at 28,800. This has some standard features that we find in Rolex movements, like the Paraflex shock absorbers and Parachrome anti-magnetic hairspring with overcoil. That overcoil helps to regulate positional induced accuracy or gravitational accuracy problems. It gives us a more consistent timekeeping. New for this movement, of course, is the 70-hour power reserve, thanks to, in part, a 15% more efficient chronology escapement is what they're calling it, and a new profiled mainspring barrel, which basically gives you more room for probably a longer spring if I had to guess. Nevertheless, that does in combination with those features and probably others, give us that 70-hour power reserve. Is 70 hours of power reserve a strong draw for most people? I guess it depends on the person. For me, yeah, I would say I'd love to have a watch with 70-hour power reserves instead of 48. A lot of people rotate through their watches so quickly that it largely is irrelevant to them. So I guess it's up to the individual user, but I'm happy to see that longer power reserve coming into the newer Rolex watches. This Rolex Oyster Steel case, which of course is still wearing its protective plastics, is extremely well done. And even though we can't get the very best look at that polish, what we have here are polished flanks or sides on both sides of the case, with the very nice, extremely well done brushing that Rolex is known for on the tops or hoods of the case. Over on the 3 o'clock side, we do have these enlarged crown guards protecting our trip-lock crown. The trip-lock crown is signed with the Rolex Coronet logo and the 3 little dots below that crown logo to designate it as a trip-lock crown. Overall, it's, again, very much like what you would be used to in a standard Oyster Steel or Oyster case from Rolex. Whether or not the profiling of these lugs was trimmed down or not is up for debate in my opinion. Maybe it is slightly. I really don't see it. Coming off of the case, of course, we have solid end links on this Jubilee bracelet. The brushing of the end sections of the bracelet links is matching up in theme with that brushed of the tops of the lugs. And then, of course, we have polished 3-piece on the center links. Overall, the fit and finish of this watch, like all Rolex watches that I've seen, is absolutely outstanding. And talking about this crown, we'll go over the crown and also the GMT functionality of this watch. Screwing out the crown is absolutely buttery smooth, as you would expect. Once you get it out into the first position, of course, we can hand wind the movement. Very, again, silky, buttery smooth. Pulling the crown out to the first position, which is a little difficult with my gloved hands, allows us to quick set the main hour hand or our local time. So as we're traveling, right now we're at 10, almost 15 on the Eastern time zone. If we went back 4 hours to the Pacific time zone, we would just rotate it back 1, 2, 3, 4, and we would now be in the Pacific time zone at about 6:15, but we'd still see our GMT hand pointing to our home time of 10 a.m. That's how I like a GMT system to work. Now, some people would have the GMT hand pointing at the GMT or UTC time. I wouldn't do that because I think it's easier to remember offsets from my home time. What I mean by that is, what if now I wanted to know a third time zone, such as London? Off the top of my head, I know that London is 5 hours ahead. So I just moved the bezel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clicks. And now by looking at the GMT hand, we can see that we're pointing at 1500 hours or 3 p.m. We know that it's 3 p.m. in London with that simple little calculation. If you had the GMT hand pointed at UTC time, you would just need to memorize different offsets. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, I guess. Pulling the crown out to the last position hacks the movement, and as you can see, we can set the time. Move the minute hand out of the way a little bit here. And I will also demonstrate that you don't quick set the date on this watch like you might on, say, a Submariner. When you pull it out to the first position to set your local hand, as you rotate around, the date quick sets. So you have to rotate a full 24 rotations to set the date ahead, 1 hour, for example. Not a big deal, not a problem for me. I think that if you were picking up the watch and it said the 1st and you had to quick set forward to the 17th or something, sure, that would be mildly annoying, but I just don't really think it's a very big issue. Pushing the crown back in and then screwing it down works very well. With gloved hands, maybe not as much, but I can still manage here and get that crown screwed right back down snug to the case, which helps reinforce that water resistance rating of 100 meters. We'll talk about the crystal next. There is no AR coating at all on this crystal, with maybe the exception underneath the Cyclops magnifier. I believe that Rolex does AR coat under the Cyclops magnifier. So we do get a lot of glare on the crystal here, and that's probably one of my only complaints about Rolex watches in general, or a generalized complaint that I have about most Rolex watches. I would love to see AR coating underneath the crystal. It's just not a feature that they have there, so I guess we have to live with it. When you're in good lighting, though, the crystal is very clear and very legible, and there's no problems with it. That crystal does sit proud of the bezel ever so slightly, if I can get a good profile and focus there. Otherwise, though, it is perfectly flat with the exception of that Cyclops magnifier. Moving on from the crystal, of course, we have the bezel. Very good traction or knurling on the outer edge, just like the Submariner in my experience. And of course, that red and blue ceramic or Cerachrom insert. The action of the bezel, very, very good. It's only a 24-click bezel, so not an elapsed time bezel like you might be more accustomed to on a dive watch. It's meant for tracking time zones, of course. The big polarizing thing about this bezel is going to be the coloration. How is the red and how is the blue? Well, I'll talk about that more in my closing thoughts, but there's a pretty good look at it, and I think that on camera it's fairly representative of how it looks in person. Rolex's dials are really well done. This is, of course, a glossy black dial, and it features white gold markers and a white gold handset. This one, unlike regular, or regular is not the right word, but maybe a standard stainless steel sports Rolex like the Submariner, features the red GMT hour hand. Overall, an absolutely excellent presentation. If you like Rolex styling, this is Rolex all the way with that Mercedes handset and those circle plots or markers, with the exception of the triangle at the 12 and your stick or baton markers at 6 and 9. The printing on the dial, Rolex Oyster Perpetual Date, GMT-Master II at the bottom, all very well done. At the very, very bottom of the dial, we can see that there's Swiss made with the coronet logo or crown in between. I think that might be new for 2018. I haven't seen that particular designation of the Swiss made down there like that, so that's pretty cool, and I like that little crown. It's kind of cute. The next sort of polarizing thing about this watch is going to be that Jubilee bracelet, and like the blue and red Cerachrome bezel, I'm going to talk about the bracelet in my closing thoughts in more detail. Suffice to say that I think the bracelet is very nice, though. We have brushed sides with the 3 center pieces in olive high polish, which does terminate down into the folding oyster lock safety clasp with that 5mm Easy Link extension. On the clasp itself, which is of course still wearing its protective plastics, we have the coronet logo on the fold-over safety latch. Opening that up shows us the very nice high polish on the clasp itself, high polished in the center, brushed on the sides, and then polished on the edges. The clasp opens up with this very nice hinged locking mechanism to show us this Rolex stainless steel high polished swing arm system. Very, very nicely done. And then again, as I had mentioned, we do have that Easy Link extension. As you can see there, it's opened, fold it back with a small snap, and close it back down. And again, just with a small pop, you fold open to get 5mm of toolless adjustment on your clasp. I'm personally not a very big fan of the Easy Link extension. I've talked about it in my Explore video. I think that 5mm is just too much for my wrist. I know a lot of people think that the 5mm is perfect, go from hot to cold. That little extra extension works good for most people. I much prefer the 2mm adjustments on my Submariner's glide lock system. I think that that's more usable. But it is a nice system, it's very well made, and it works well. I'll go ahead and throw this watch on my wrist so that you can get an idea of what it looks like on a 6 3/4 inch wrist. Just give me one moment. So here we have the GMT-Master II, reference 126710BLRO, the GMT Pepsi on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. I think it fits perfectly. I think it looks fantastic. It wears more or less just like my Submariner, maybe a little more lightweight because the Jubilee bracelet doesn't feel quite as heavy. And of course it's not sized up perfectly. I got some room there. Could be taken in a little bit, but nevertheless, I think it looks outstanding. If I could take it home with me today, I absolutely would. Alright guys, that covers my thoughts, my impressions, my review of this watch, but stick with me for a few more minutes. I am going to talk about a few things in the closing thoughts that I think are important. Number one, this bezel. How does the red and blue look? A lot of people have a negative impression of this bezel. Is it too red? Is it not red enough? Is it too blue? Is it not blue enough? Well, I think it looks great, and I'll talk about that in my closing thoughts. Secondarily, a lot of people find the Jubilee bracelet to be very polarizing. We're going to talk about that and give you my thoughts and opinions on the Jubilee bracelet in those closing thoughts. Finally, we're also going to talk about availability, perhaps the most polarizing topic about this watch. Can you even find one? So don't run off just yet. Stick with me for a few more minutes. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that presentation of the Rolex GMT-Master II Pepsi. A beautiful watch. What do I think of it? Yeah, I really do like it. I could definitely see having this as a part of my watch collection in the not too distant future. Hopefully they'll become more available, and when they are, I'm honestly going to consider picking one up. Now, that comes to those hot topics that I want to discuss, availability being one of them, but before that, let's talk about the bezel and the bracelet. Those are the two polarizing hot topics amongst people that I've seen talked about over and over online. The bezel. Is the red and blue a very good representation of a Rolex Pepsi GMT Master from yesteryear? No, it's not exactly. I mean, it's a ceramic, so they're not going to be able to replicate those colors exactly like they did on the aluminum bezels. Goes without saying. Is it still a good version, or does the coloration look good? In my opinion, yes, it does. The red looks fine. I honestly don't see any of the main complaint being that the red comes across as pink. That didn't come through to me. In the lighting condition at the store over at Bigham Jewelers, maybe in different lighting conditions, it would present a little bit differently, but I thought the red looked great. The blue, does it look a little purple? I would say yes, it does look a little bit purple, but again, I think that's going to have a lot to do with the lighting conditions. I was under, I'm guessing it was fluorescent lighting, maybe it was LED, but in natural sunlight, I've seen a lot of pictures where that blue comes across as an even more rich blue. But in the conditions that I was in, it looked a little bit purple, but it wasn't bad. I didn't find it to be distasteful, just not exactly like an aluminum bezeled GMT from years gone by. That's not what you're getting here. Overall, I thought it looked great, and I had no problems with it. Of course, your mileage may vary. Some people absolutely dislike the way that the coloration on this bezel looks. It's not different than the white gold version that's been on the market for years. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I'm not exactly sure, but that version has been on the market for years and years, and it looks basically the same. So if you liked that one, you're going to like this one. If you didn't, you're probably still not going to. The next one that is hotly contested online that I have found is the GMT being on a Jubilee bracelet. What do I think of the Jubilee? I think it's outstanding, honestly. I've always been a fan of GMTs on Jubilee bracelets. I've always been a fan of Jubilee bracelets in general. My Seiko SKX on the Jubilee is one of my favorite watches. So that this is on a Jubilee instead of a oyster bracelet, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a nice change. Now, a lot of people would much prefer this watch to have been on an oyster bracelet. Well, the oyster bracelets on the other GMTs have polished center links, and that's another hotly contested or debated topic. Do we like polished center links or not? So it's like, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You're never going to please everybody. I think Rolex did the right thing here, putting it on this Jubilee bracelet, though. It's outstanding. The clasp is fantastic. Sure, I'm not the biggest fan of the Easy Link extension. I don't find it to be particularly useful for myself, but I know a lot of people do like that. So I would say thumbs up. I think they did a really good job here with this decision. I honestly like it a lot. The last thing that gets discussed or debated online a lot is the availability or the lack thereof. They're extremely difficult to find right now. We've seen them sell on gray market websites for upwards and over $20,000 with an MSRP of about $92.50. That's more than double the price. It's crazy, I know. What can you do? Get on a waiting list, I guess. That's about it. I think hopefully in the coming year or two, they'll become more available. I've read people online every single day on different forums posting pictures of their new watches. I don't think they're as limited maybe as we thought they were going to be. I don't think it's going to be like the Daytona, where you're not going to be able to find them at all for the better part of, a decade. I just don't think that that's going to be the situation. It's a brand new model, and it is highly sought after right now. I expect that the availability will become much more reasonable, again, in the next year or two would be my guess. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for tuning in. Big thanks to Bigham Jewelers for allowing me to come down to their store and check this watch out. Hopefully they will continue to let me do this in the future. I had a fun time going down to the store and looking at it and visiting with the guys down there. It's been a great experience, so big thank you again. If you guys want to help support the channel, there's a number of ways you can do that. Down in the description of every video I do is a list of ways you can help me out. Number one, following me on social media, be it Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, whichever you prefer would be a great start. Number two, I could always use more help over on Patreon. Big thanks to the guys that are over there supporting me right now. I really appreciate it. And again, I could always use a little more help there. Number three, whenever I review a product, I try to put links to that product down in the description of the video through my Amazon affiliate account. If you click on that Amazon link before you buy anything that I've reviewed, or anything else for that matter, I get a small commission. Those commissions do add up. They do really help me out. big thank you to everyone that's been using those over the last year or two. It's been fantastic that you guys have been trying to help me out any way you can, so thanks again. All right, that's going to close out this video, and we'll probably have something come up on the weekend, so until the next one, I'll go ahead and say bye now.